I overheard my daughter-in-law telling her friends, "Now I'll finally get rid of that shrew and that I deserved a room in an assisted living facility NGOI." But when I read the will, it was her who had to pack her bags. The funeral home smelled of lies and grief. I stood beside James's casket, my hand trembling as I touched his cold cheek one last time. My only son, my beautiful boy. How could this be happening? At 70, I never imagined I'd outlive my child. No parent should. The cancer took him so quickly. 4 months from diagnosis to death. Not enough time to say all the things that needed saying. Not enough time to prepare for a world without him in it. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. Mrs. Davis, would you like to sit down? The funeral director's voice was gentle, practiced in the art of comforting the bereaved. I nodded numbly and allowed myself to be guided to the front row of chairs. People kept approaching, murmuring condolences I couldn't quite hear over the roaring in my ears. I accepted their hugs and handshakes mechanically, a puppet going through the motions of human interaction. Nothing felt real. How could the world still be turning when James was gone? Emily, my daughter-in-law of 14 years, sat beside me in a perfectly pressed black dress, her makeup flawless, despite the tears she dabbed away periodically with a monogrammed handkerchief. She had been James's college sweetheart. I'd welcomed her into our family with open arms. Loved her, like the daughter I never had. "I need some air," she whispered, squeezing my hand before rising gracefully and making her way toward the back of the room. I watched her go, wondering how we would support each other through this. James had been our bridge, our common ground. What would our relationship be now? A few minutes later, I needed to use the restroom. My arthritis was acting up and I needed to take my medication. I made my way slowly down the hallway using my cane for support. As I approached the small alcove where smokers gathered, I heard Emily's voice, unnaturally bright and relieved. God, I thought this day would never end. So many people coming up to me telling me how sorry they are, asking what they can do. She let out a dramatic sigh. As if I need their casseroles and their pity. A woman laughed softly. At least it's almost over. What happens next? Next, I finally get my life back. Emily's voice hardened. And I get to finally get rid of that old shrew. I froze, my heart stuttering in my chest. She couldn't possibly mean. Margaret, another woman asked. Of course, Margaret. Emily's voice dripped with contempt. James insisted she live with us after William died. She has nowhere else to go, Emily. She's all alone, Emily. Well, now James is gone, and I don't have to pretend anymore. What will you do with her? There's a perfectly adequate assisted living facility in Joai. Emily laughed, a sound I'd always found musical, but now struck me as cruel. She's pushing 70. It's where she belongs anyway. Won't she fight it, the first woman again? With what resources? The house is in my name. James and I made sure of that when his father died. She signed everything over to us, remember? To avoid probate, we told her. Emily's voice dropped to a mock whisper. The old bat doesn't even realize that James left everything to me. In a week, she'll be packing her bags. I gripped my cane so hard my knuckles turned white. The bathroom forgotten. I retreated silently, my whole body shaking. How could I have been so blind? All these years, I thought Emily loved me. I thought we were family. Back in the viewing room, I looked at my son's peaceful face through new eyes. Had he known how his wife really felt about me? Would he have done something differently if he had? I wiped my tears and straightened my spine. I would not let Emily see me broken. Not today. Today was for James. The rest of the funeral passed in a blur. I accepted more condolences, spoke briefly at the service, watched as they lowered my son into the ground. Through it all, Emily stayed close, her arm linked with mine, the perfect picture of a grieving wife supporting her heartbroken mother-in-law. But now I knew better. Now I heard the falseness in her voice when she said, "We'll get through this together, Margaret." Now I felt the impatience in her touch as she guided me to the car. As we drove home in silence, I stared out the window at the passing scenery, wondering where I would go, what I would do. I had no money of my own, having given everything to James and Emily years ago. No home, except the one Emily now wanted me out of. But there was one thing Emily didn't know. Something James had told me during one of our last private conversations when Emily was out arranging hospice care. "Mom," he had whispered, his voice weak, but his eyes clear. "I need to tell you something important about my will." I turned to look at Emily's profile as she drove her face composed and cool. Let her think she had won. Let her make her plans. The reading of the will was scheduled for tomorrow. I couldn't sleep that night. How could I, with Emily's words echoing in my head, that old shrew, finally get rid of her? The assisted living facility NGOI is where she belongs anyway. As I lay in the guest bedroom, never truly mine, despite living here for 6 years, memories washed over me like waves. Each one more painful than the last, now that I saw them through this new lens of betrayal. I remembered the day William died 7 years ago. My husband of 42 years, gone suddenly from a heart attack. James and Emily had come immediately, helping with the funeral arrangements, sitting with me through those first terrible nights. It was Emily who had suggested I sell my house and move in with them. "Mom, it makes no sense for you to rattle around in that big house all alone," James had said, his arm around his wife. "We have plenty of room, and we could use the money from the sale to invest for your future," Emily had added. "So you never have to worry about finances." It had seemed so sensible at the time, so loving. I sold the house William and I had built together, the home where James had grown up. I gave James and Emily the money, $320,000 to invest. I never saw a statement, never questioned where the money went. I trusted them completely. I got out of bed and walked to the window, looking out at the elegant backyard with its swimming pool and professionally landscaped gardens. The down payment for this house had come from my money. The renovation that added the pool and outdoor kitchen, my money too, but the house was in their names, just like the vacation cabin in the mountains which we'd bought using the last of William's life insurance for tax purposes. Emily had explained it's simpler this way. I'd never questioned it. Why would I? They were family. I moved to the dresser and opened the bottom drawer, pulling out the old photo album I kept there. Pictures of James as a baby, a toddler, a gangly teenager. James at his college graduation. James and Emily on their wedding day. I paused at a photo of all of us at James and Emily's 10th anniversary party. Emily stood slightly apart, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Had the signs been there all along? There were other memories too. Small moments I'd dismissed at the time. Emily's impatience when I was slow getting in and out of the car due to my arthritis. Her sighs when I'd ask for help with technology. The way she'd schedule family gatherings when my bridge club met, then act disappointed when I chose to keep my commitment to my friends. "You know how important family is to James," she'd say, making me feel guilty for having any life outside of them. And there were the grandchildren, Lucas 14 and Chloe 11, who I loved with all my heart. Emily had always controlled my time with them, limiting visits, supervising our interactions, as if she didn't trust me alone with them. "The kids have their routines," she'd explain. "Too much excitement isn't good for them." I'd accepted it all, grateful to be included in their lives at all. What a fool I'd been. As dawn broke, I made another troubling realization. Over the past few months, as James's cancer progressed, Emily had been unusually busy, often leaving James in my care while she attended to urgent business matters. She'd started dressing differently too. More stylish clothes, a new haircut, subtle makeup, even just to run errands. At the time, I'd thought maybe it was her way of maintaining normalcy in the face of James's illness. Now I wondered if there was someone else. I remembered the text message I'd glimpsed on her phone 2 weeks ago when she'd asked me to find her charger. A message from someone named Michael. "Can't wait to see you again. Last time was amazing." I told myself it must be a business associate. Emily worked in real estate. She was always networking, but now the pieces were falling into place. Emily's business trips that often extended through weekends, the hushed phone calls behind closed doors, the new clothes, the subtle makeup. She'd been having an affair while my son was dying. The rage that filled me was like nothing I'd ever experienced before. How dare she? How dare she betray my son, plan to discard me, and probably take everything we'd worked for to start a new life with someone else? I was still sitting there, clutching the photo album, when there was a soft knock at my door. "Grandma?" It was Lucas, my grandson. "Are you awake?" Mom said, "to tell you we're leaving for the lawyer's office in an hour." I took a deep breath, composing myself before opening the door. Lucas looked so much like James at that age, the same serious eyes, the same cowlick at the crown of his head. "Thank you, sweetheart. I'll be ready." He hesitated, then stepped forward and hugged me fiercely. "I miss Dad," he whispered. "I know, honey. I miss him too." Over Lucas's shoulder, I saw Emily appear in the hallway. She smiled that false saccharine smile and said, "Don't bother Grandma too long, Lucas. She needs to get ready." Her eyes met mine, cold and calculating. "Today is an important day." "Yes," I thought as I closed the door to dress. Today is indeed an important day. The day Emily learns that her plans may not unfold exactly as she expects. Because during one of our last private conversations, when James was lucid and Emily was out, he had gripped my hand with surprising strength. "Mom," he'd said, "I've been watching and listening. I've seen things, learned things. I need you to know I've made arrangements." I hadn't understood then, but I was beginning to now. The law office of David Clark occupied the entire top floor of a modest building on Main Street, Chicago. As we filed into the conference room, I leaned heavily on my cane, the weight of grief and anxiety making each step laborious. Emily walked ahead, her spine straight, her designer heels clicking confidently on the hardwood floor. She had dressed as if for a business meeting, rather than for the reading of her husband's will, a sleek black pants suit that spoke of efficiency rather than mourning. Lucas and Chloe followed behind us, unnaturally subdued. I reached out to touch Chloe's shoulder, and she pressed closer to me. At least they still wanted my comfort, despite whatever Emily might have told them. Mr. David Clark, James's attorney for the past decade, greeted us with appropriate solemnity. He was a slight man with wire-rimmed glasses and thinning gray hair, but his handshake was firm as he guided us to our seats. "Thank you all for coming," he began, shuffling papers before him. "I know this is a difficult time." James was very specific about his wishes, and it's my duty to make sure they're carried out exactly as he intended. Emily nodded, her expression grave but composed. Under the table, I noticed her fingers tapping impatiently against her thigh. Before I begin the formal reading, I should mention that James made changes to his will approximately 6 weeks ago, Mr. David Clark said. Emily's fingers stilled. "Changes? What kind of changes? He never mentioned any changes to me." Mr. David Clark looked at her over his glasses. "Yes. Well, he came to see me privately." He was quite clear about his instructions. A flicker of uncertainty crossed Emily's face, so brief, I might have missed it if I hadn't been watching for it. I see, she said, her voice slightly higher than normal. Well, proceed then. First, Mr. David Clark began regarding the family residence at 258 Oak Street and the vacation property at Lake Michigan Cabin. I held my breath. These were the properties purchased with my money, the homes I had helped create but had no legal claim to. Both properties are to be placed in a family trust with Margaret Davis named as trustee. The trust specifies that Margaret Davis has the right to live in either property for the remainder of her life. Upon her passing, both properties will transfer to Lucas and Chloe Davis to be shared equally. Emily's face drained of color. That's impossible, she said, her voice tight. The houses are in my name. James can't just actually. Mr. David Clark interrupted gently. While the family home was indeed purchased in both your names, James transferred his interest in both properties to a trust 4 years ago with your signature on the transfer documents. The Lake Michigan Cabin was never in your name at all, contrary to what you might have believed. It was purchased directly into the trust. I remembered signing papers 4 years back, just routine estate planning, James had said. Emily had been annoyed at the time, claiming it was unnecessary. Had James suspected even then? As for James's financial assets, Mr. David Clark continued. His retirement accounts, which amount to approximately $900,000, are to be divided as follows. It is 65% to a trust for Lucas and Chloe's education and needs with Margaret Davis named as trustee, 20% directly to Margaret Davis for her care and maintenance, and 15% to Emily. Emily's composure cracked. That's all. There must be some mistake. Her voice rose sharply. I'm his wife. There's no mistake, Mrs. Davis. I drafted these documents myself at James's explicit instruction when he was dying. Emily stood up her chair, scraping back loudly. He wasn't in his right mind. He was on medication. This can be contested. Mr. David Clark's expression remained calm. James was perfectly lucid when he made these changes. I assessed his competence myself, and we had his doctor provide a written statement confirming his mental capacity. I would advise against contesting the will, Mrs. Davis. It would be costly, time-consuming, and unlikely to succeed. Emily looked around wildly as if seeking an ally in her outrage. Her gaze landed on me, and the naked hatred in her eyes made me flinch. You, she hissed. You did this. You turned my husband against me. I said nothing, too stunned by these revelations to form words. James had protected me. Had he known all along what Emily was planning? Mr. David Clark cleared his throat. There's more, Mrs. Davis. James left a sealed letter to be read in the event that you contested any part of his will. He held up an envelope. Would you like me to read it now, or would you prefer to continue with the remaining provisions? Emily sank back into her chair, her face a mask of fury and disbelief. Continue, she said through clenched teeth. The family business Davis Design Group is to be placed in trust as well, with 75% ownership transferred to Lucas and Chloe to be managed by a board until they reach the age of 25. The remaining 25% is allocated to the company's current employees through a profit-sharing plan that James established last month. Emily's hands were shaking now. In what exactly am I supposed to live on? Mr. David Clark adjusted his glasses. In addition to your share of the retirement accounts, James established a monthly allowance for you of $3,500 to continue for a period of 6 years or until you remarry, whichever comes first. Remarry? Emily's laugh was brittle. I just lost my husband. Yes. Mr. David Clark said, his tone neutral but his eyes knowing. That's why I found his specific mention of remarriage interesting. The days following the reading of the will were like living in the eye of a hurricane. Emily moved through the house with barely contained fury, slamming doors and speaking to me only when absolutely necessary. When she did address me, her voice dripped with venom. This isn't over, she said the first night, cornering me in the kitchen. James was manipulated. He wasn't thinking clearly. I met her gaze steadily. James was protecting his family, his children, and his mother, as he should have. Her laugh was cruel. Family. You think this is about family. This is about money, Margaret. My money. The life I built with James that you're trying to steal. I never asked James to change his will, I said quietly. I didn't even know he had until yesterday. Liar. She stepped closer, her finger jabbing the air inches from my face. You played the helpless old lady card. Made him feel guilty. Well, I won't let you get away with it. I'm contesting the will. And she did. 3 days later, I was served with legal papers. Emily had hired Robert Mitchell, a high-powered attorney known for aggressive tactics in divorce and probate cases. The lawsuit claimed James had been unduly influenced and lacked testamentary capacity when he changed his will. I called Susan Taylor, my oldest friend, and a retired judge in tears. Susan, I don't have money for attorneys. Everything I had went into those houses. Don't worry, Susan said firmly. I know exactly who you need. That's how I met Karen Lee, a formidable elder law attorney who took one look at my situation and agreed to represent me for a reduced fee payable after the case was resolved. This is elder abuse, Karen said bluntly during our first meeting. Financial exploitation. James recognized what was happening and took steps to protect you. Now we'll finish what he started. Emily's first move was to try to force me out of the house while the case was pending. Karen blocked it with a temporary order. Her second strategy was to limit my access to the grandchildren. They need stability right now. Emily told the children's teachers and our neighbors. Margaret's mental state is concerning. She's making wild accusations, turning the children against me. It's elder paranoia, the doctors say. I hadn't seen any doctors, of course, but the whispers spread. Lucas and Chloe came home from school asking strange questions. Grandma, are you sick? Chloe asked one afternoon, her small face creased with worry. Mom says you might have to go to a special hospital. My heart broke. No, sweetheart. I'm not sick at all. Then why is Mom saying those things? Lucas demanded. At 14, he was old enough to sense the tension to question the contradictions. I chose my words carefully. Your mom and I have different ideas about what should happen now that your dad is gone. But we both love you very much. Emily walked in at that moment, her eyes narrowing as she saw us together. Kids, go do your homework, she ordered. After they reluctantly left, she turned to me. Don't fill their heads with your version of events. I haven't told them anything, I said. She snorted in disbelief. Just remember, no matter what that will says, I'm their mother. I decide what's best for them. The court battle dragged on. Emily's attorney filed motion after motion, each one requiring a response, each one draining the trust's resources meant for the children's future. It was a war of attrition. She was betting I would give up rather than deplete their inheritance. Then came the day I found Emily in James's home office, rifling through his desk. What are you doing? I asked from the doorway. She jumped, then glared at me. This is still my house. I can look through my husband's things if I want to. You're searching for something specific, I observed. What is it? Emily shoved the drawer closed. None of your business. But I had seen enough. She'd been focusing on a section where James kept personal papers. What was she looking for? What was she afraid of? That night after Emily went out with Michael, I presumed though she claimed it was a business dinner, I went into the office myself. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I felt James guiding me. In the bottom drawer, taped under a stack of old tax returns, I found a sealed envelope with my name on it. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a USB drive and a handwritten note. Mom, if you're reading this, things have gone as I feared. Emily has shown her true colors. The evidence you need is on this drive. Financial records, emails, recordings of conversations. I started gathering it when I first became suspicious last year. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I wanted to protect you, and I needed time to secure everything legally before confronting her. Then the cancer came, and I ran out of time. Know that I love you, and I'm grateful for everything you've done for us. Now let this help you protect yourself and the kids. James. With shaking hands, I took the drive to my laptop and plugged it in. What I found stunned me. Dozens of documents meticulously organized financial records showing how Emily had gradually siphoned money from their joint accounts to a private one in her name only. Emails between Emily and her lover Michael, dating back 2 years, discussing their plans for after James was out of the picture. Most damning were the recorded conversations legal in our state, without two-party consent, where Emily explicitly discussed putting me in a assisted living facility NGO, I against my will, and liquidating the family assets. Once the old bat is locked away and James is gone, we'll sell everything and move to Orlando, Florida like we planned, Emily's voice said clearly in one recording. No one will question it. I sat in shocked tears streaming down my face as I realized the full extent of James's efforts to protect me. He had known all this time as he fought cancer. He had also been fighting to secure his children's future and my well-being. The next morning, I called Karen. I have something you need to see, I told her. Something that changes everything. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined, more intimate, which somehow made it more intimidating. I sat beside Karen, my back straight, despite the pain in my joints, my hands folded primly in my lap to hide their trembling. Across the aisle, Emily sat with her attorney, Robert Mitchell, a man whose reputation for ruthlessness was evident in the sharp cut of his suit and the cold calculation in his eyes. Emily herself looked immaculate, as always dressed in a conservative navy dress that screamed grieving widow. She avoided looking at me directly. Judge Margaret Hill, a stern-faced woman in her 60s, studied the documents before her with intense concentration. The courtroom was mostly empty except for a few spectators. Susan Taylor had come to support me, and surprisingly, Lucas sat in the back row. At 14, he wasn't required to attend, but he had insisted. Emily had tried to prevent it, but the judge allowed it after Lucas himself requested to be present. This hearing is to address the petition to contest the will of James Davis. Judge Margaret Hill began. I've reviewed the filings from both parties. Mrs. Emily Davis claims the deceased was not of sound mind when making his final amendments and was unduly influenced. Ms. Karen Lee, you filed a counter-motion to dismiss the petition entirely. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor, Karen said, rising smoothly. And we've submitted new evidence that bears directly on this matter, which we believe renders the contest moot. Robert Mitchell stood immediately. Your Honor, we object to this alleged new evidence. It was not part of the initial discovery. It was discovered only recently, Karen replied calmly. And we've followed proper procedure to admit it. Judge Margaret Hill peered over her reading glasses. I'll allow it, Mr. Green. Please continue, Miss Karen Lee. Karen nodded. Your Honor, we have evidence that Mrs. Davis was engaged in a long-term extramarital affair during the deceased's illness, that she planned to institutionalize her mother-in-law against her will, and that she intended to liquidate family assets immediately after Mr. James Davis's death, assets that were intended for the care of his children and his mother. A murmur ran through the small courtroom. Emily's face drained of color. Furthermore, Karen continued, we have evidence that Mrs. Davis discussed these plans explicitly with her paramour, a Mr. Michael Adams, via email and recorded conversations which Mr. James legally obtained in this single-party consent state. This is absurd, Emily burst out, half rising from her seat. Robert Mitchell put a restraining hand on her arm. Your Honor, he said smoothly, these are wild accusations with no bearing on the validity of the will. Even if such evidence existed which we dispute, it would be inadmissible, as it was obtained without my client's knowledge. Actually, Margaret countered the recordings were made by Mr. James in his own home and office, where he had every legal right to record conversations. The emails were accessed from accounts Mr. James legally had access to, as they were on shared devices and in some cases joint accounts. Judge Margaret Hill held up a hand. I'll review the evidence in chambers to determine admissibility. For now, let's proceed with testimony. Miss Karen Lee, call your first witness. The defense calls Margaret Davis. Karen said. I rose, shakily made my way to the witness stand, and was sworn in. Karen guided me through gentle questions about my relationship with James, the financial arrangements after my husband's death, and my life in the family home. I spoke clearly despite my nervousness, determined that James's efforts to protect me wouldn't be in vain. Then it was Robert Mitchell's turn to cross-examine me. His smile didn't reach his eyes as he approached. Mrs. Davis, isn't it true that you were financially dependent on your son? Yes, I answered honestly. After my husband died, I gave James and Emily the proceeds from selling our house. And now that he's gone, you stand to gain control of significant assets that would otherwise go to his wife. Convenient, isn't it? Karen objected immediately. Argumentative, Your Honor. Sustained, Judge Margaret Hill said. Mr. Mitchell, confine yourself to questions, not insinuations. Robert Mitchell changed tactics. Mrs. Davis, have you ever been diagnosed with dementia or memory issues? No, I said firmly. Yet you claim to have been unaware of your son's changes to his will until after his death. Isn't it possible you're misremembering conversations with him during his illness? I met his gaze directly. My memory is perfectly clear, Mr. Robert Mitchell. James told me he had made arrangements, but he didn't share the details. He wanted to protect me from exactly this kind of confrontation. The questioning continued, Robert Mitchell trying to paint me as a confused old woman manipulating her dying son. But I remained steady, truthful, and clear. After I stepped down, Karen called her surprise witness, Michael Adams. Emily gasped audibly as a tall, sandy-haired man in his mid-30s entered the courtroom. He avoided looking at her as he was sworn in. Mr. Adams, Karen began, could you please describe your relationship with Emily Davis? Michael shifted uncomfortably. We've been involved for about 2 years. Involved how exactly? Romantically, intimately. We met at a real estate conference. She told me her marriage was essentially over, that she was only staying until... Until what, Mr. Adams? Until her husband died, he said quietly. She said it was just a matter of time, and then we could be together openly. Emily's face contorted with fury. You traitor! She hissed, loud enough for everyone to hear. Judge Margaret Hill banged her gavel. Mrs. Davis, control yourself, or I'll have you removed. Karen continued methodically, having Michael confirm the existence of emails and recordings, their plans to move to Orlando, Florida, and Emily's intentions regarding me and the family assets. By the time Robert Mitchell began his cross-examination, the damage was done. Michael's testimony had corroborated everything on James's USB drive. From the back of the courtroom, I could see Lucas's face, pale, shocked, his eyes filling with tears, as he learned the truth about his mother. My heart broke for him, even as I knew he needed to hear this. As the hearing concluded, Judge Margaret Hill announced she would review all evidence in chambers and issue her ruling the following week. But her expression as she looked at Emily told me everything I needed to know. James had won. Even from beyond, he had protected his family. 2 years have passed since that day in court. 2 years of healing, of rebuilding, of finding a new normal without James. The pain of losing him never truly fades, but it has softened around the edges, allowing space for joy to creep back in. Judge Margaret Hill ruled decisively in our favor, dismissing Emily's petition to contest the will and upholding all of James's final arrangements. Emily was furious, of course. She ranted and threatened further legal action, but her attorney advised against it. The evidence was too damning, the judge too convinced. In the end, Emily had no choice but to accept the ruling. She took her 15% of the retirement funds, nearly $175,000, and moved to Orlando, Florida, with Michael. Last I heard, they had already broken up. Some relationships, it seems, aren't built to last beyond the thrill of secrecy and forbidden plans. She gave up custody of the children without much of a fight, surprising everyone except me. I had seen how she was with them, beautiful but distant, more concerned with appearances than with their emotional needs. When Lucas announced he wanted to live with me, Emily barely protested. Chloe was more torn, but eventually chose to join her brother rather than move across the country with a mother she no longer trusted. The first few months were the hardest. The children grieved not only their father, but also their mother. They thought they knew. They had questions I couldn't always answer. Pain I couldn't always soothe. We went to family therapy together, learning how to talk about the hard things, how to build trust again. "Why didn't Dad tell us about Mom?" Lucas asked one night as we sat on the porch swing that had been James's favorite spot. "I think he was trying to protect you," I said carefully. "He wanted to confront her to fix things, but then he got sick. After that, his priority was making sure you would be taken care of." "He saved us," Lucas said simply. "He saved you too, Grandma." I nodded, tears welling in my eyes. Yes, he did. We live in the family home now, the three of us. I've taken the master bedroom, something Emily fought bitterly over, though it was specifically outlined in James's will. I've redecorated it, simply removing the expensive furnishings Emily had chosen and replacing them with comfortable pieces that feel like me. The Davis Design Group continues to thrive under the management board James established. They consult me regularly, value my input, and ensure the children are kept informed about the business they'll one day inherit. I've learned more about architecture and design in the past 2 years than I ever expected to know at my age. Chloe, now 13, shows real talent for design herself. She spends hours sketching buildings and interiors, proudly showing me her ideas. "Dad would have loved this one," she often says, and I agree. James lives on in her creativity, in Lucas's thoughtfulness, in 1,000 small ways that catch me by surprise and make me smile through tears. Lucas at 17 has grown tall and serious like his father. He's already talking about studying business and architecture in college, about eventually taking over the company. "I want to make Dad proud," he told me recently. "You already do," I assured him. Every single day we use the Lake Michigan cabin, often spending holidays and summer weeks there, creating new traditions while honoring old ones. Last Christmas we invited Susan and her family to join us. The house was full of laughter and warmth. James would have loved it. Emily calls the children on birthdays and holidays, her voice artificially bright. The conversations are brief, awkward. She has made no attempt to visit, though she's legally entitled to. The children seem relieved rather than disappointed by her absence. As for me, I found an unexpected freedom in widowhood and grandparenthood. I've joined a book club, taken up watercolor painting, even started dating a kind widower named Frank, whom I met at a community garden. Nothing serious yet, but it's nice to have coffee with someone who makes me laugh, who looks at me and sees a woman. Not just a grieving mother or a doting grandmother. Sometimes I wish James could see us now. How we've healed, how we've grown stronger through the pain. But then I think perhaps he can. Perhaps he knew all along that we would be okay. That the provisions he made would give us not just financial security, but the chance to become a true family, bound by love and choice rather than obligation. I still talk to him sometimes when I'm alone. I tell him about the children's achievements, about the business, about the quiet contentment I found in this life he protected for me. "You would be proud," I whisper, touching the photo of him I keep by my bed. "You did, good son." Yesterday was the anniversary of James's death. We visited his grave together, the three of us, bringing fresh flowers and sharing memories. As we walked back to the car, Lucas put his arm around my shoulders. "You know what I think Dad would love most," he said. "That we're happy again, that we found a way forward." Chloe nodded solemnly, and that Emily got what she deserved. I smiled at my grandchildren, these wise young souls who had been through so much, yet remained gentle and kind. "I think you're both right." Last night, as I settled into bed, I thought about how drastically my life had changed from what I'd feared that day at James's funeral. Instead of being discarded in an assisted living facility NGO, I've forgotten and alone, I found myself at the center of a loving family, in a home that was truly mine. Surrounded by reminders of my son's love, I remembered Emily's cruel words spoken when she thought no one who mattered could hear. "Now, finally, I'll get rid of that old shrew." The irony wasn't lost on me. In the end, Emily was the one who had to pack her bags and leave. James had seen to that his last act of love, protecting those who truly deserved it. As I drifted off to sleep, I smiled. They say living well is the best revenge. If that's true, then this quiet, joyful life, this reconstruction of what was broken, is the sweetest victory of all.